Moving on, let's know our expert speaker for the day, Mr. Nagendra. Can you move on? Yes. Well, he's passionate about Gen AI. He's passionate about Agile, design thinking, DevOps, truly, very current industry related passions. Our speaker host for today's session. He's done his education from Brandeis University and University of Pennsylvania, Wharton, and he holds a couple of certifications, all very industry relevant, by the way. And he has worked with Honeywell and IBM. Well, over to you, Nagendra. I won't take much of your time.
Okay, thank you so much, 𝗪𝗂𝘁𝗂𝘁𝗂. Hi, folks. Let me share my screen if I can do that. Awesome, thank you. Let me know if I'm clearly audible and my screen is visible, 𝗪𝗂𝘁𝗂𝘁.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And once again, folks, very excited to be amidst all of you today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Nagendra Nyamgondalu. I go by Nagen. And before I get into our topic at hand today, let me tell you a bit about my journey with Agile, right? Because all that we're going to talk about today is very relevant to Agile practitioners and Scrum Masters. Well, that's the topic, right? So it's been more than a decade since I started my journey with Agile. I was with IBM at the time. And I think initially we went through a lot of rough waters, right? Choppy waters, because I was new, the team was new. There was too Agile, that is. And there were not as many success stories about Agile back then as there are now. And so the first couple of months were a bit rough. But I think eventually we got to a point where we were a very mature Agile team. And that experience counted a lot when I moved to my next role, where I had to set up a fairly large engineering organization as an Agile team, a globally distributed one too. So that was very interesting and came in very handy. All that experience came in very handy. Since then, I've done a lot of coaching in Agile space. I've acted as a coach, mentor, an enterprise Agile transformation coach, and so on. And in all that, I think for the last year or so, the one thing that's creating a lot of excitement is how can a very powerful technology paradigm like generative AI step in and create more value in this space, right? So that's kind of going to be our discussion and conversation around today. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. Let's get started. The topic is closer to the heart of Scrum Masters, although if you're not currently in the role of a Scrum Master, you're practicing Agile in any role, shape, or form, I think it's still a very interesting conversation to have today. But since the topic very specifically calls out Scrum Master, let me spend a minute or two on Scrum Masters, right? I think to me, Scrum Masters are not given their due sometimes, because they are the great enablers, right? If I'm asked what is the one key responsibility of a Scrum Master, I would probably say enable, right? And whether they'll enable their team with skills, with what they need to perform their jobs, whether they help the team work together, they help them keep their focus on the goal, whatever it is that they're doing, Scrum Masters are the great enablers and have been since the concept came about and since people have been taking up the role of Scrum Master. So who will enable these great enablers? Right? And I think the answer to that is something very powerful, something that can act as a partner in the room. And that's where I believe generative AI can make a huge difference. So let's take a look at what are some of the possibilities in this realm. I'll share some examples. I'll share some of my own experiences as we go. And I also have a quick demo for you folks that you may find interesting using one of the generative AI tools, which I absolutely love. So we'll take a look at that as we go along. I think my colleagues will help collate any questions you may have. Since it's a short format webinar today, I may not be able to take questions along the way, but I'll certainly try to keep a few minutes towards the end for questions and answers. So you can continue to share your questions with my colleagues, and they will collate it, and hopefully we'll be able to get through a few of those towards the end. Okay. So who can enable the Scrum Master? And I believe generative AI is certainly something that fits the bill. So let's talk briefly about AI, generative AI, and especially in the context of Agile and Scrum, right? I'm sure as we all are on the same page, artificial intelligence is something that has been around for a couple of decades at least now, if not longer. There's been a lot of research being done in that, and it has many different aspects to it, whether it's natural language processing, neural networks, deep learning, machine learning, or more recently, generative AI. All of these have been kind of under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. Generative AI is the newest kid in the block, so to speak. And among other things, what it can do really, really well is understand your context. The more data, the more documents, the more context you give these generative AI tools, the more they'll be able to understand what you're looking for. And using prompts and prompt engineering, if you're able to interact with these generative AI tools, it can help us in practically any situation or context these days, albeit with some asterisks there, right? Because it's still an evolving technology. So I'm not saying all gung-ho that, hey, we should absolutely trust everything that generative AI does for us. But I think it's a very exciting, very evolving space. As I work with various customers across various industries, various domains, without a fail, almost every one of them is exploring what can generative AI do for us. So let's talk about our brethren, right? Our, so to speak, our fraternity of Scrum Masters and what it can do to Scrum Masters, right? What it can do for some Scrum Masters. So AI and agility, I'm sure, is something that is not very new. There have been various experiments done in this space, various projects that have used some aspects of AI to bring about that enhanced agility. What can it specifically do for us is something that I'll talk a bit about, right? To start with, Agile itself was a very transformative concept. And now with AI playing a key role, or the ability or the possibility to play a key role, it represents an even bigger transformative force, as ultimately Agile is primarily about three things, right? Embracing change, having a focus on continuous improvement, and breaking down large and complex tasks into smaller iterations. I'm sure all of you will agree with me that that's ultimately what Agile is all about. And if you look at each one of these aspects, right, whether it's embracing change, whether it's keeping that continuous improvement loop, the reflect and adapt loop alive, or whether it is focusing on delivering value to customers, whether it is breaking down a large and complex task into smaller iterations to deliver that value faster and better, each aspect has its own set of complexities, its own set of nuances that everyday Agile practitioners deal with, and especially a Scrum Master has to deal with, right? And that's where I think use of powerful tools like artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI, can make a huge difference, used in the right way, right? So as with any artificial intelligence-based technology or tool, the more data we have, the more data we can provide these tools, the more context we can set, the more it can help us with informed decisions and an enhanced level of engagement. So why should Scrum Masters really care? Because they are really at the forefront of facilitating these agile journeys, right? A Scrum Master's role does not just start and end with setting up all these agile ceremonies, does not just start and end with doing the sprint planning or running the sprint review or the sprint retrospective, but it's really all about being that steward, that custodian of agility in the organization and the team. And to do that, they face a lot of challenges, a lot of roadblocks, and are often looking for ways to bolster the agility within the team and the organization, especially if it's a large and complex one. And I believe, and with my experience, with my observations, and hopefully all of you will agree with me, and some of you may have observed this as well, AI can play a very pivotal role. So what are some of the things we can leverage AI for? The first thing that comes to mind is automation, right? Scrum teams have a lot of high-touch activities, and they also have a lot of repetitive tasks that they do. So the first thing that the Scrum Master can start thinking about is, what are some of the possibilities in the space of automation that can help me and my team, such that we need to focus less on some of these repetitive tasks and more on fostering innovation, more on generating that value for our customers, bring out our talent in solving problems and formulating a strategy that can help us succeed with this project or deliverable that we are working on, right? So what are some of these routine tasks and how can they be automated? What are some of the things that can be useful to a Scrum Master? Are some of those things that we'll take a look as we go along. If you think through an iteration, a sprint, right? It starts with the product owner describing or defining what are we going to focus on, what are our priorities. Can the AI actually start with helping us prioritize those items? Once the priority is done with or without the assistance of AI, then the team gets around breaking it down into actionable tasks, user stories as we know them, and estimating them in terms of how long will it take for us to do this, how complex are these, and how much of that can we accommodate in the upcoming iteration or sprint. And all that needs to be done upfront for that particular iteration, right? So within that, again, what if there is a user story that is too big to accommodate? Often we fall into the trap of splicing these user stories horizontally, right? We'll get the UI part done in this sprint, and we'll get the database or the backend logic done in the next sprint. But that's not really the way to do it, because then it does not add any value to users, those individual pieces. So vertically slicing a user story is much better, but easier said than done. So these are some of the tasks that often take up our time. These are some of the things that often take up a lot of resources and effort. And I think that's where generative AI can play a huge role. Imagine being able to tell a generative AI tool, hey, this is the context, this is what we're working on for this sprint, and this is the user story we're kind of stuck on. Can you help us splice this vertically? And boom, it gives you 5 different options, and you can pick the best options in that and go with it, right? What would otherwise have been maybe a 90-minute discussion and not a very productive one at that, now becomes maybe a 3 to 5 minute activity with a generative AI tool. So imagine that. And what does that do? That ultimately frees up the team, because another key aspect of agility is giving every team member their own swim lane to go ahead and innovate, complete their tasks on time, and ultimately add value to their stakeholders and customers. And if you are going to free up their time to do that and more of that, that's exactly the kind of tools that I think will act as partners in the room, right? Is that all generative AI or agile, AI can do for agile practitioners? No, I think we are barely scratching the surface here, right? AI-powered analytics, and that's something that I'm kind of excited to show you today, right? I can't wait to get to the demo part. I hope you find it exciting as well. Although we'll again be looking at a fairly simple use case there. Imagine if all the data that we collect through the various tools that we use as part of being agile practitioners, whether it's your choice of using Jira or Azure DevOps or ClickUp or Asana, Trello, there are many tools out there, right? I don't have any specific tools I'm going to recommend, but regardless of what tools you use, the one thing that's constantly happening as the teams work through the sprints is accumulation of data. Can we use this data to look at what can we do better going forward? Can we predict what kind of quality can we expect in the upcoming sprints? In fact, I would even go to the extent of saying, can we help our release managers, our product owners, to figure out which sprint in the upcoming sprints can they actually use to have a release candidate? If we have many sprints going on, every sprint we are completing some tasks and user stories. They imagine if they can predict with ease, saying, hey, this is the sprint we want to pick and then make a delivery, whether it's an MVP, a beta candidate, or a real release, what have you, right? A lot of this right now is speculation. I think the team will complete this milestone by this sprint, and that's when I'm hoping to give something to the customers. A lot of it is speculation, and often these plans change because things don't work out as planned. What if you're able to make that more predictable? Because another key tenet of Agile is making our work more predictable. And I think AI can be of huge benefit there as well, being a partner in the room that can look at our sprint historical data that can tell us that, hey, I expect quality to be of this nature, by this sprint. I expect you to be dealing with these kind of challenges by the sprint. And I would recommend that this upcoming sprint be the next release candidate for you or the next MVP for you, and so on. So AI-powered analytics, again, is something I'm talking about it in one slide, But I think in reality, we can probably end up spending a whole day talking about this possibility, right? So there is that to consider as well. So let me actually jump over to the demo now. Since we talked about AI-powered analytics, I think I would be remiss not to show you what the possibilities here are. Some of you perhaps have already explored some aspects of this, but hopefully by showing you a quick demo of what I have today for you, it will kind of open up your mind to more possibilities as well, right? So let me quickly share my entire screen. Give me a quick second while I do that, because I need to switch screens a lot as we go. Okay. So here is the scenario, right? The scenario is that there is the business team in an agile construct is planning a release in a couple of sprints. They're not exactly sure what would be a good release candidate, and are looking for some analytics from the agile team on the quality of the deliverables, because they're very worried that we should not end up delivering something that does not have the right quality and does not set up the right customer expectations of what we're going to deliver in the future. So what I'm going to demo is how a generative AI tool, the one that I'm going to use is called Julus.ai. Perhaps some of you are familiar with it. Maybe some of you have used it. And there are many other tools like this, right? I'm calling out Julus.ai because I'm comfortable using it, and I've used it quite a bit. So that's not to say this is the only tool that can do this kind of a job. There are many others that can as well. But in the spirit of introducing you to at least one tool today, I would like to introduce you to Julus.ai, and let's see what it can do if we provide some sprint data to it. So here is the sprint data I have, right? This is just some synthetic data I have created. Obviously, there is no real project here. But very quickly to walk you through, in case it takes you a minute to see what all these numbers are, the first row are all just sprint numbers, right? Sprint numbers. And the second row is talking about the capacity in each of those sprints in terms of how many resources were available or what bandwidth those resources brought to the table, right? So this was the capacity of 6.5 people, 5.5 people, and so on. As I'm sure you're all aware, capacity can vary depending on who's on vacation or who's been pulled aside to solve a customer escalation and so on. Then the third row you see is velocity, right? Where that was the sprint velocity in terms of the number of story points the team was able to deliver sprint on sprint. You can see it's kind of averaging somewhere between 26 and 30. How many severity 1 defects were discovered within the sprints? How many severity 2 defects were discovered? How many severity 3 defects were discovered, right? These kind of start speaking to the quality of those sprints, right? And you can see it's a bit up and down, and I've purposely randomized it. I've not given it any specific pattern just to make things interesting for our AI tool. Regressions are the ugliest of those defects. So there are the occasional regression as well in some of the sprints. Beyond that, as quality, one of the things I'm sure all of you will agree on, we look for is test code coverage, right? So you can see that it hovers between 65 and 67 here. Test case automation, how many test cases did we automate is another metric we have here. And we also have given some additional data that were any of these past sprint release candidates. And you can see only sprint 6 was a release candidate, right? And you can see that customer adoption of that particular deliverable was about 42%, which is neither here nor there. It's neither fantastic nor is it too low. So with this kind of a data set, what kind of analytics can we expect? What can we do with a generative AI tool is what I'm hoping to demo to you folks, right? So let me switch over to my web browser where I have Julus.ai open. So if in case you have not used this tool, please do explore it. I think among many other tools, this one is kind of cool too. It allows you to choose which runtime you want your analytics to run, like Python and R are the choices. I'm just going to go with the default of Python. So the first thing I have done here is I've uploaded my spreadsheet. As you can see, I uploaded sprint data, the one that I just showed you on Excel. And the question I asked was very simple. Hey, we are planning a release at the end of sprint 7. Can you predict a release quality report? Can you tell me whether this upcoming sprint will be good enough for us to release to customers? And any details you can share with me about the quality in terms of predicting, because sprint 7 has not yet happened. Can you predict the quality report of the release? So you can see one of the things Julius does is it actually shows you what's the code it's running for you. So if you're a code buff, you can take a look at it. Otherwise, it's just additional information. We can ignore that for now. I'm not going to walk through any code. But I've also kept this whole exercise intact when I did this from a few weeks back, is because I also want to show you that these tools are not perfect. They are evolving, but they do have that sense of autonomous repair, right? So you can see here what Julius came back with, that it tried to look at my spreadsheet and errored out. It ran into some error. But here's the interesting thing. It tells me I apologize for the error. It seems the structure is different from what I initially assumed. I'll fix this and we can continue. And then it continues. It doesn't, I don't need to tell, hey, okay, continue. Or I don't need to tell it, please fix this error. It just informs me that there is an error and continues to try fixing it. And then it comes back saying, okay, now I understand what you've given me, right? And it gives me a quick explanation of what is there in the spreadsheet, right? Now, then it says, based on this information, the sprint numbers are actually in the columns and the metrics are in the rows. I've purposely kind of switched those. So it does a bit of a cleanup. And even there, it runs into some issues, right? Again, it apologizes for the error. And then it says, okay, I'll clean it up and prepare the data. And then we'll start looking into what you asked for. So that I find all this very interesting. I could have done this again and hope that the error won't occur, but I've kept it there because I'm also hoping it's kind of instructive for all of you that even with all these tools and all these AI technologies evolving, it does run into some issues once in a while, and don't let that frustrate you, right? My point here was don't anticipate that everything will be smooth and perfect. If you do run into some hiccups, don't let that frustrate you. There are ways to get around it or validate that what outcomes we are getting are the right ones, right? So ultimately, it comes back and tells me that the data has been successfully cleaned and processed, and the predictions have been calculated using something called linear regression. It is a machine learning algorithm, for those of you familiar with it. If not, don't worry about it. And an interactive plot has been created to visualize the metrics. So let's see how that works, right? So here are the predictions for sprint 7. If you remember, I had data up to sprint 6, and from sprint 7 on, basically, like, it has added the predictions for me. That part, like, I've added some data here. It added some data for me. I'll show you what that means. So it predicts that capacity will be about 5.75. Velocity will be about 26.6. There'll be 2.1, approximately 2 to 3 severity 1 defects, which is not good. So there'll be about 6 severity 2 defects and about 8 to 9 severity 3 defects. It expects that there are very little chance of a regression this sprint, and a test code coverage of about 62% and test case automation of about 60%, right? So it comes up with this prediction. Now, of course, one might wonder, this is all very good, but how can I trust this, right? So true, a lot of AI technologies today are black boxes, right? We give it data and it gives us outcomes, and we have to find ways to validate it ourselves. So in this context, I also want to mention that there is also some research being done on something called XAI. You may have heard this term, XAI, which stands for explainable AI, where the decisions behind the scenes today, which is a black box to us, is kind of made transparent, where the AI tells you that based on the data you gave me, this is what I did, and this is how I came up with the outcome. Right now, it's just giving me the outcome, right? But with the concept of XAI, which is explainable AI, there is a push to make AI more transparent in how it came up with these outcomes. So we get a chance to validate whether it's using the right type of algorithms and should we trust that data, right? But that's a conversation for another time. It also created an HTML page, right, that I can click on, and that can show me some visualizations. Let me take you to that HTML page. So here's that HTML page where you can see it helps me visualize what is the capacity and can anticipate for sprint 7. What is the velocity I can anticipate for sprint 7, the number of 7 defects, and what is the pattern, right? You can see it's going up and down a bit. And it expects that by sprint 7, the defects actually go down a bit. So that's a good thing. If I'm a release manager or a product owner, I'm looking at it saying, hey, that's actually better. Maybe I can consider a release, right? Regressions, it expects to go up a bit, but still not significant enough to be worried. Test code coverage will go down a bit. That's not good. So maybe we can focus on making sure our test code coverage is better going into the sprint. And test case automation will stay largely flat, right? So it even created this visualization for me. I didn't even ask for it. It even created this visualization for me, right? Now let's assume that I'm also looking to create some synthetic data for some testing. Maybe I want to take 10 sprints worth of data, take it to a different tool and visualize it. Though I'm only done 6 sprints or 5 sprints so far, I want to get some synthetic data. Synthetic data as in artificially created data for the sake of testing. And so the next prompt I had for Julius AI is, can you generate synthetic data for 5 more sprints in the file I uploaded? And here is what it did, right? So it came back saying I have generated synthetic data for 5 additional sprints, and the combined data has been saved to a new Excel file that you can download using the link below. So I can click on this and download it, right? So imagine if you're looking for test case coverage, more test cases, more data, so maybe some edge case kind of data to test your tools and code. Synthetic data is another great option that generative AI provides for you, right? For instance, let's say we are looking at some retail data, and as part of our testing some kind of retail application, the actual data that we have only has certain types of good data. Maybe there is no one or two types of edge cases we actually are anticipating and have taken care of in our code, but we don't have test data to actually test what happens if the data is incomplete, or what happens if the data has these kind of values which are not valid. We can actually create synthetic data. I just asked for 5 additional sprints, but if you're looking at a real data set, you can actually ask these AI tools to create maybe another 1,000 rows worth of synthetic data, another 5 years worth of synthetic data, what have you. So that's another great use case, if you ask me, for many of these generative AI tools. So I'll stop my demo here and go back to my slides, folks. I hope this was interesting, and I hope it opened you up to some possibilities in terms of what generative AI can do for you. If you're looking to predict, analyze, slice and dice, understand your team's deliverables and the upcoming sprints better. Of course, that's just one possibility. There are a whole host of other possibilities as well, right? So let me share my screen again. This time I'll bring up just my slides. Give me a quick minute while I do that. Okay, I'm back with my slides. So let's continue. I've completed this demo. Let's continue then. I just have a few more slides to talk through, and then I'll be handing it back to my colleague 𝗪𝗧. So what are some of the other things we can do, right? Backlog optimization with AI. So I referred to it a few slides back. Imagine you're the product owner or one of the product owners at a very large online operation. Think large scale, like your Amazon.com or your Flipkart.com or one of those really large .com operations. And in these organizations, they are making changes to the production code quite often because they are constantly tweaking some features. They're tweaking some of the way they display their catalogs. They have a whole lot of strategies that they keep applying to their online portals. And as feedback and operational data is coming back saying this did not work, this worked well, you can change this. Imagine if we can put some kind of an automation in place where, depending on feedback or usage of certain features, we actually are able to create the next set of backlog automatically. This is actually possible. No, I'm not trying to say the product owner role goes away, but the product owner can actually be an enabler for this kind of automation, where based on data coming in, you can use an automation platform, for instance, like Zapier, right? That's just one example, where Zapier looks for incoming feedback and data and feature usage, adoption by customers, and so on. Uses that data to feed a tool like your ChatGPT or Julius.ai or any of these generative AI tools, which already has the context of your project, by the way. Remember, the more context and data you give these tools, the better their outcomes will be. Yes, data privacy and other things can be a bit of a concern, but we'll address that separately. So as this platform like Zapier is feeding incoming data in terms of customer adoption, feedback, usage of certain features into a tool like a generative AI tool, it's able to absorb that, look at your past backlog and suggest new backlog items for you Imagine how much easier this makes the job of a product owner, right? And you can use various machine learning techniques for prioritizing those features. So if your generative AI tool like a GPT-4 comes back with a suggestion for 6 new backlog items, you can then use some kind of a machine learning algorithm to prioritize those. Which should I do first? Which would maximize the impact to my customers and my global audience, and so on, right? So there's a lot that can be done in this space as well in terms of backlog optimization with AI. If you look back at retrospectives, right, it's a very key aspect of the reflect and adapt loop, the inspect and adapt loop, or the continuous improvement loop. That's one of the key tenets of Agile. As an Agile coach, sometimes I feel we don't focus on those enough. Retrospectives tend to be done very mechanically, where the team members just call out some things, saying some things that went well, some things that didn't go so well, and we move on. But that data right there, if done well, can actually be very instrumental in improving what we are doing going forward. If we really focus on continuous improvement, there's a whole lot out there that we can do. And again, AI can come in very handy there, right? Imagine being able to take all the comments from your team members in the retrospective, anonymized if you want, feeding it to an AI tool and looking at patterns, right? One of the worst mistakes we can do in Agile is not fix something and repeatedly make the same mistake. So if we do an analysis that over the last 10 sprints, at least 4 different comments refer to a problem with one of the tools we are using. What have we done about it? So right there, you can visualize it. The Scrum Master can visualize it and say, hey, if I look at the retro data, this problem has come up repeatedly over the last 10 sprints, at least 4 times. And looks like we really need to fix it. We can't afford to ignore this, right? So starting with things like that, there are many things that AI tools can help with that ultimately lead to genuine continuous improvement, and not just continuous improvement for the sake of talking about it and moving on, right? So retrospectives can become a really useful part of your continuous improvement loop, especially if you're able to take the data from there and look at some of these AI tools as a partner in the room that can look at the data for us, tell us that, hey, you missed this pattern. Not just that, you can even have these AI tools recommend, hey, can you recommend what are the top priorities I should focus on in the issues called out by my team members? And also tell me what's the best action I can take to fix those, right? So it goes beyond predictive analytics. It can also do prescriptive analytics, where it can prescribe solutions, saying, since this tool has always been a problem, I would say start creating a plan to migrate from this tool. From the context you've given me, I understand that your broader organization also has a license for this other tool or a subscription for this other tool, which can be a good replacement. I would recommend you start trying a pilot on that for the next sprint. And if it works, move your data to that tool and start using that. So these are the kind of prescriptive answers that AI can give you as well. So imagine the kind of impact you can have. Again, I want to keep emphasizing that it's easy to get lost in the thought that, okay, so that means AI is going to replace roles. I don't think we need the role of a product owner, a Scrum Master or such going forward. But I would make the argument that the product owner, the Scrum Master roles can be enriched by these tools, not as much replaced, right? Cool. Beyond that, reports, right? There are always stakeholders looking for reports. Hey, can you tell me what was the quality of the code over the last 6 sprints? Can you tell me what was the velocity of this team for the last 6 sprints, and compare it with the other 3 teams in this project? There are always all kinds of data and reports that people are constantly looking for, because hopefully it's because they want to make better decisions, but sometimes people just have this curiosity too, right? So regardless, as stakeholders come to us for various data, patterns, reports, and so on, imagine if we can drive efficiency in this through AI, generative AI, and other kind of tools, which are able to use our data by connecting to the project management tools we are using, whether it's Jira or what have you, get the data on a regular basis as new things are created, and start creating insights in the form of reports, right? So yes, this is very realistically possible today. I actually know at least a couple of my customers who do this today, right? They actually get data from their Jira dashboard automatically exported into one of these Gen AI tools without any human interference. And the dashboards are created and in place in the form of interactive web pages for stakeholders to go take a look at. As stakeholders send in emails or chat messages saying, can you make this particular change to the report? I would like to see this kind of report next time. All the Scrum Master needs to do is feed that back into the AI tool, and it takes care of that for the next time, right? So some really awesome things have already started evolving in this space, folks. And perhaps some of you are involved with that. But for others, I hope this gives you a chance to explore possibilities. Let's talk about the team a bit, right? The team itself is the core of any agile setup. It's really the team members who do all the work. And the most valuable asset of any organization are its people. So in this context, what can AI do for us? Well, starting with us assessing team skills, helping us put together a team for high performance, helping act as a coach for some of these team members, and figuring out ways to enhance collaboration among team members, especially if you have a distributed team or a hybrid team and so on. There are various challenges today in terms of getting an agile team to work well together as one harmonious unit, right? And as Scrum Masters struggle with these challenges, and they look to solve these challenges with no easy answers, because there is no silver bullet. People related problems are the hardest, because human beings are very complex organisms, right? So people related problems are often the hardest to fix. And I think AI can again play a very interesting role there. I have seen a couple of demos here where there have been Scrum teams that actually use an AI enabled tool as a coach, right? And I've seen some very interesting results there as well. So in terms of the team dynamics, increased collaboration, working harmoniously as one team, especially if it's a distributed or hybrid team, Scrum Masters can use these AI capabilities in a lot of different ways, starting with fostering a culture of collaboration by perhaps understanding what's the best time to set up a meeting. Because if a Scrum Master has to understand everyone's schedule and everyone's workload and only then set up discussions, often that can be very taxing and error prone as well. So imagine the AI tool recommending that based on all your team members and the work that they're doing this sprint and some of the updates they've posted in Jira recently, I recommend that if you want to have a discussion with them, 4 p.m. tomorrow would be a great time. Imagine if that kind of a recommendation can come through, right? It's very possible and very real today. So what are some of the tools that are popular today among Scrum Masters and Agile professionals? There are a whole host of tools. I don't think we are going to go through every one of them, but here are a few that I'd like to call out, right? Atlassian does a lot of interesting things with their Jira, with their Confluence products, and they have something called Atlassian Intelligence now. I believe they recently unveiled a new AI-based service called Rovo. I think it's called Rovo, R-O-V-O. Asana, Trello, Jira, ClickUp, all of these have certain intelligence built into it these days. Not very sophisticated, but can be useful in boosting productivity. We looked at Julius already in the demo. I talked about Zapier as a very cool platform for promoting automation. There's Microsoft or Git Copilot, there's Google Gemini, and many others as well. So we'll talk about a couple more of these as we look to wrap up our session today. What I would like to do now is I'd like to share a short video with you. This is actually a publicly available video, so it's not like I have some secret access to these cool videos. But I think it's an interesting one in terms of what is Atlassian Intelligence and some of the capabilities it offers us. Perhaps you've seen this, perhaps you've used it, but if you have not, I think it opens up some cool possibilities. So let me share this video with you, okay? Let me switch off my own camera and play this video for you.
All right, like the
Can 𝗪𝗖𝘂𝗁 or one of you, my colleagues, confirm that audio video is okay? In this video that I'm playing, is audio video okay, 𝗪𝗖𝗂 or Christabel? Please let me know.
All right, one last feature with Premium that I want to highlight is Atlassian Intelligence.
Yep, it's audible.
Intelligence provides your team with a new virtual teammate that deeply understands how you collaborate to accelerate work. Leveraging AI through internal models and our collaboration with OpenAI, Atlassian Intelligence is built into the Atlassian platform, the common technology foundation across all of our cloud products. Atlassian Intelligence is available, like I said, with Premium, but also with enterprise cloud plans as well. So let's take a look at some examples in which we can use AI in Jira. So one is the generative AI in the issue editor, which will help teammates craft better responses, adjust their tone to be more professional or empathetic. And then it could also summarize a lengthy thread and much more. So here we're telling a teammate that we need something from them, but perhaps we want to change this a little bit. Notice how we're using acronyms here. So maybe we want to kind of improve the writing. So maybe that's a little bit more clear. So here we expand on that acronym. Perhaps you want to change the tone, make it more professional. Perhaps you know this team member and you want to make it a little bit more casual instead. You can do all of that with AI straight in the generator. Another use of AI is going to be using the issue search. Here, you can use Atlassian Intelligence to translate what you type into a Jira query language code, which quickly searches for the issues that you're looking for. So you can tell AI to search for issues in a simple language instead of coming up with complex JQL queries. So here, it is already going to pull the project. It is looking at the status category and making sure that the status category is in progress. And instead of you going through the filters yourself, or like I said, using JQL, you can just type it and tell it what to do. You can also edit it and it will refresh and then update anything that's necessary, like the project here. You can also use Atlassian Intelligence to generate automation rules, kind of similar to what we just saw here. If you don't want to come up with your own automation rules, you can use AI to come up with it for you. Here, we'll generate an automation rule with AI, and you simply just need to describe the rule you want to create. So here, at the end of the quarter, I want all open issues to be closed. And then here you have it, an automation rule where you did not have to create it yourself. It is going to say when this happened for specific issues, then transition issue to done. Just review the rules, make sure everything looks good, and let the robots do the work.
So that was a video actually officially published by Atlassian. It's, as I said, a publicly available video. So no, I'm not recommending that Atlassian is a tool that all of you must use. I'm tool agnostic that way. But I thought it was an interesting video that at least begins to showcase some of these capabilities, right? Especially that one with the issue search. Many of us who work in large organizations with complex Jira environments might kind of identify this, where if you need to search for a type of issue or a pattern of issues across multiple Jira boards, writing those Jira queries are really a pain, right? And every time there's an update to these tools or some new tool is adopted by an organization, we often have to reacquaint ourselves with it, right? Tomorrow, if Jira goes away and some new tool comes in, you now have to learn how to use that tool. How do you do queries in that? How do you set up boards in that? How do you set up dashboards in that? Imagine if, in the near future, all these tools, you don't have to worry about learning how to use the tool. You only have to worry about how to interact with the tool, right? You can just write a prompt saying, hey, new tool, whoever you are, Jira++ or whatever it is, can you set up this board for me? Can you do this for me? Can you give me that report? Can you help me with this dashboard? I think that's the kind of future we are headed for. And this is only but a small preview of that, right? Okay, let's continue then. I just have a couple more slides and then my part of this webinar will mostly be done. So as we look at many of these tools, I think one of the things we need to think about is how do we integrate them into our existing workflows, right? Because organizations, teams, the processes they have, there will always be some kind of a workflow. For instance, a simple workflow in a development environment is that any code that is submitted always has to be peer reviewed by at least one or two people or some designated team leaders who have to peer review it. There'll be some kind of process and workflow in it. Now, as you're looking to set up AI-based processes or AI as a productivity enhancer or a partner in the room, you'll need to be able to integrate that into these workflows, right? So imagine if AI can come back and say, hey, John needed to review this code for you today, but I see John is on vacation. I've looked at the code and these are my comments. So maybe you can work on these comments while John comes back from vacation tomorrow. Imagine if an AI tool can do that for you, right? It's very possible, folks. I've actually seen something similar to this being experimented with in many organizations. And I think there's a lot of possibilities out there that we need to start exploring, because if we don't, we're going to get left behind. Very honestly, we're going to get left behind because a lot of organizations, a lot of competitors in various spaces are gearing up to see how can we use this very powerful paradigm in practically everything that we do, right? And why should Scrum Masters and Agile practitioners be any different? My last call out is Gen AI for DevOps. DevOps is a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I think if any of you work in the technology space, DevOps is something that you cannot afford to ignore. And you possibly are already putting together a DevOps strategy or part of the DevOps team for your organization. So think of the possibilities that AI can bring to DevOps, right? Because in DevOps, the most top 3 things needed, as I often say, I'm jesting here a little, but the top 3 things needed in DevOps are automation, and automation, right? So AI-powered automation that can help you monitor your CI/CD pipeline. It can analyze the output of every build. It can tell you about scaling your infrastructure. It can maybe give you suggestions on what kind of a test virtual environment you should set up based on the test cases. It can predict issue detection, and many other things. One of the cool things that I really like is the code assist capabilities, right? Although some organizations have policies around whether their developers can use this or not, broadly speaking, GitHub Copilot and AWS Code Whisperer are very popular tools these days. It's not like we're going to create the whole code base using these tools. I don't think that's the intent at all, nor is it feasible. But as a developer is writing code, they'll often write little helper functions to do some specific tasks for them. And that takes up time. It's not a great value add for them to think through the logic behind it, because it's fairly standard and boilerplate. So imagine being able to, as you're writing code, you have a little bot that's saying, hey, how can I help you? And you can say, can you write this function for me, take these 2 arguments and return this value for me? Boom, done in less than a minute. And I, being a kind of moved on from a professional programmer to a hobby programmer now, and I've tried this myself, and I can tell you in most cases, it works really well, right? So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. And why should Scrum Masters care about Gen AI in the context of DevOps? Because without DevOps, I think that better and faster value addition, the core goal of Agile, without DevOps, I think will still be remiss, right? I think with the DevOps infrastructure is when ultimately you will be able to deliver that value. And that becomes very, very key for the teams working in an Agile way. And DevOps I think goes very hand in hand with Agile these days. And Scrum Masters are an integral part of that, right? That's what I truly believe. Challenges in implementing AI, as with anything else, there can sometimes be resistance to change. That if I adopt this, I somehow think my own value will be depleted. I have not seen too much of this, but it can be part of human nature. But the big one are the bottom two, right? In terms of training needs, because one of the key things about these technologies is garbage in, garbage out. If the prompts that you're giving, the context and the data sets you're giving these tools are not up to the mark, then the outcome you get will also be diluted at best, bizarre at worst, right? And you get some really bad results if you don't use it carefully. So I think it's important that every individual, regardless of role, must be trained on how to use these AI systems in a way that will be productive for them. And equally so, some of the ethical considerations, right? Because there are always ethical considerations in terms of where do these generative AI tools go get their information from? Are they violating any intellectual property or copyrights? Are they infringing on any privacy of data when they give us back some information? So we have to be a little careful about using this. And there are some guidelines, standards, policies being put in place. And I think that's evolving, and we need to keep an eye on this as Scrum Masters as well. All right, folks, I think that's me. I'm out of time. I didn't have anything else to share with you today. These are just concluding slides. I would just encourage you to explore AI in your roles. But I think that's kind of the end of my session here today. I think we can have a couple of minutes for Q&A. Hrithika, do we have time for a few questions, or do you want to jump to your slides? Please let me know. My part is done.
And again, we definitely would take a few questions. We have a couple of them before we dive into, our next part of it.
Sure.
Would you want me to read them out, or you would want to take them on your own from the chat box?
Sure, I can do that. No problem.
However you're comfortable.
Sure. So folks, I know that there are many questions in there. I apologize. I won't be going through all of them. I may simply not have the time. But let's see if I can grab a few of them randomly. Okay, I'm not prioritizing one or the other anyway. So let me see if I can grab a couple of questions. Some of them are observations and comments, so I'll skip through those. Let's see if I can get to a question. Any demo on automating reports that you mentioned? This is from Rajeshri. Rajeshri, I don't have a demo with me handy today, but certainly something that we'll be including as part of our upcoming programs in Upgrade Knowledge Hub for Scrum Masters and AI. Not just demos, we'll be doing a ton of activities, and we'll be exploring various tools as well. Related question from Namrata: which tools are needed for automated reporting? At the very least, you will need some kind of an automation platform that will act like a central glue for all these. So I would start with Zapier or something similar, Namrata. And from there on, whichever automated reporting tools you are comfortable with, whether it is Power BI or whether it's Tableau, or even if it's just Excel, all of those are possible. But the more important thing is you need to figure out which will act as the hub for all the inputs and the outputs. And I would one name that comes to mind is Zapier. Okay, so Arindam, I think I answered your question. Looks like Supriya had the same question as well. Awesome. So it looks like
again, if you just scroll, I was just having a look at them just to be more swift. If you scroll towards the end, there's one question, I guess, from Gavin George. I think it's a question. It's quite a big comment.
Yeah, I was coming to that just now. So thank you for pointing it out. Let me take a look at that question. If AI is going to suggest you code, Scrum suggestions, Agile suggestions, then what is there for humans to do? Looks like in making models for AI, AI is getting better in doing robust work. I know it seems that way, Gavin, right? But as I kept insisting on emphasizing all along, all these are only going to enhance the kind of work that we as humans do. I've not seen a single instance, and I mean that, I've not seen a single instance of AI replacing a human role. I don't think we're quite there yet, because the initiation, setting the context, thinking through the process and the framework are still very, very human value-added activities. What these AI tools do, if you ask me, is often we spend a lot of time on things that take us time to process and do, right? That's where I think AI can step in and get that done very quickly and efficiently for us, freeing up our time to do more value-added activities. So I see this as a step up for human roles. I don't see this as a replacement for human roles. And every instance and every example I've seen in the last year to 2 years since I've started dabbling in generative AI is where these tools enhance the role of the humans, give them more time to focus on more value-added activities, innovation, creativity, and so on. And I don't see any possibility in the near future, at least, especially in the context of Agile and Scrum Masters, where it replaces any human role. I just don't see that happening. I hope that's at least a start of an answer, because what you asked is a much bigger philosophical discussion, but I hope at least I gave you a start of an answer. Okay, one last question from Sebastian, and then I'm going to hand it back to Hrithika. How can we implement the output of these AI tools when management does not approve the strategy of using these ways? So I think, Sebastian, it comes down to your organizational policies, right? We all have to live within the construct of our organizational policies. So if the organizational policy prevents us or prohibits us from using some of these things, then so be it. But the good news for you is that a lot of recent surveys and studies have shown that more than 70% of executives across the globe are very open to changing their organizational policies or validating their organizational policies to include the use of generative AI for all roles, right? So even if policies are not very open right now, I see that changing very fast, because For organizations that don't allow some of these things, they're going to get left behind for sure, right? And I don't think anyone wants that. Everybody wants to stay ahead of competition. And by having such restrictive policies, we will get left behind. So I think there is some amount of caution that is warranted. So organizations need not be reckless about it, but certainly I think there is some amount of restrictions that will go away, and you'll start seeing some of those. Thank you, Namrata, for that comment. With that, thank you very much, folks. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today.